Welcome to the Staying Like Men podcast. My name is Dan Schomburg.
And I'm Logan Ingram.
And this is episode 32, which is part 2 of our conversation with Keith English. If you have not listened to part 1, pause it here and go back to episode 31 to hear part 1. What made you the man that you are today?
Okay. So now we're to the big one, right?
Now we're into the big one.
So on the, Daniel, you and Logan did a great job of kind of giving me a heads up about kind of here's what we're going to ask. A couple of kind of questions to kick it off, but I don't think that I would do justice to telling you guys where I am today without telling you where I started.
Yeah.
Mm.
My mom was pregnant with me when she was 16. The story that I got was that my dad basically pointed a pistol at her head one night and told her to get out when I was an infant. And I know but he was never around kind of thing. And my mom, being that young, being the baby of the family, she still had some, kind of wild oats to sow a little bit. But, which whenever I refer to childhood a lot, I talk about my grandmother, a couple of aunts that I had, some older cousins. Mm-hmm. But around third grade, my mom married a man. He's not a Christian, but she married him. And, at that age, a third grade boy is looking for adventure. Mm. And I got it in every way possible. We hunted all the time. We fished all the time. We worked out in the yard. We rode dirt bikes. We did everything. When it was time to cut down a Christmas tree, the little Charlie Brown Christmas tree, we were rabbit hunting, and I wasn't big enough or experienced enough yet to carry my own rifle or shotgun, so I carried the axe, thinking we were going to cut down a Christmas tree. Well, we all decided that why would we do that? There's a perfect one about 15 feet up there in the air, so all the guys surrounded that tree and started shooting at where they decided they wanted the cutoff to be, and we shot down our Christmas tree with a shotgun.
That's awesome.
It was awesome.
It is a unique and very original idea.
Oh, I remember it like it was yesterday. But what's crazy is so now I have the axe in this tree that I'm trying to pull through the woods. And by the way, it's my job to jump on the brush pile to flush the rabbits out, kind of thing. But I'll never forget that. It was always something like that we were doing. And but to kind of move forward with it, we moved to Texas at some point, probably about 3 or 4 years later. And, just next thing I knew, that relationship was done and we were moving back to Arkansas without him. And, it was one of those things where I really didn't talk to her much about that until adulthood because it hurt.
Yeah.
It left a scar, especially even if she told me reasons why at that age I wouldn't understand, So, I don't want to blame her and, kind of soil her memory much, but, it was one of those things that we never really talked about. And then from there, I remember developing this attitude that I really didn't need anybody else because nobody was going to, no matter who she dated after that or married after that or anything, they weren't going to live up to this, I had a guy there who was really invested in me. And to this day, I still talk to him, even though he hasn't been my dad since the 80s. And, it's a different relationship, but the relationship is still there.
Yeah.
And so kind of what made me the man I am today, I had a lot of strong women in my life. And I know we talked about that already. That's important. Yeah. Had a grandmother that I did not want to ever disappoint. That meant hiding a lot of the stuff we were involved with, as kids and teenagers and stuff. But so I would say just some really strong women in my life really helped kind of guide, the idea about what's right and what's wrong. Mm-hmm. I at least had some of that base, even when you're doing it. Yeah. You're like, this isn't right. And I know that if these people find out, this is going to be disappointing for them. So that's kind of the man I am today. Another thing is Angela and I got married at a young age. And it was young. And it was, hey, we're either going to do this or we're not, and we did. And I've tried to look for the source of this quote. I I know Jordan Peterson said it. I know Jack Donovan said it, but Jordan Peterson says that a boy becomes a man when he realizes nobody's coming to save him.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you talk about the moment you're like, when you're holding that daughter in your hands and you don't know how, but you're going to get through it, you know? But the crazy thing about it is when my son was born years later, it was the same experience. It's like, you have a tremendous responsibility on you.
Yeah.
And, you know, years later when Gabby come to live with us, you know, she was 9 months old when she come to live with us. And I just remember feeling that over again. You know, this is on you and on the community that you've built. So make sure it works, you know, in the family that you built. So I don't know that I thought about it like that back then.
Yeah.
But looking back, I remember just feeling that feeling of, you know, this is you now. No, nobody's going to swoop in and rescue you. You've got to take the steps necessary now to figure this out. And one interesting thing is, and I hope she watches this, is years down the line, Ariel was our firstborn. She was in her 20s. I remember texting her one time and just kind of feeling like I just, you know, when you kind of think about what you would like to do different, you know, maybe, man, I shouldn't have pushed so hard in this area, or maybe I should have been a little more forgiving here, or maybe pushed a little harder in this area kind of thing. And I don't remember exactly what I texted her, but I remember her response. And it was, "You shut up." And I'm waiting and I'm looking at the phone and she says, "None of us have this figured out."
Yeah.
And, you know, she'd already had her first child by then. And I just remember that tremendous relief that come over me that she gets it.
Yeah.
You know, all of us are trying to figure out parenthood. We're trying to figure out how to, you know, we're in this stage now where we have grandchildren and a child at home. You know, we've never done that. What's that look like? And then you look at your schedule and you're trying to figure out how to be present in their life, how to be present with your spouse, how to have a relationship with your son-in-law, how to have a relationship with now a daughter-in-law, how to balance workload. And, you know, and again, if I wrote that text to anybody else, I would hope that they would tell me to shut up and just, you know, we're figuring this out together kind of thing. So
what do you think you did right?
Oh boy.
Because a lot of times we go back and say, all right, what would you do differently? And if you want to answer that, that's fine too. Like, what would you do?
I would
do
love to
differently?
know what you do right.
But like,
I think we really focus a lot of times on what we've done wrong, and that's where imposter syndrome kind of comes from. Is thinking, well, I can't speak to being a good dad because I was a bad dad. Well, you didn't do everything bad. No, I'm not talking about you.
Yeah.
In general, right.
But just in general, like I say, I'm not a great at this thing because I failed at this thing. That doesn't mean you weren't good at certain things.
Yeah.
So I would love to hear the good stuff. Like, what did you do well?
Well, I think one of the things that worked out well, however, again, it's providence of God, right? Got the phone call from Todd Howe on a Saturday, you know. That really opened up some opportunity to get to spend, oddly enough, more time with my children, even though I was working in Little Rock that early morning and then getting back. And, you know, I got to be there and participate, you know, coaching my son's baseball team or, you know, taking my oldest daughter to practices. And I hope that, I would like to say that opened up all kinds of other avenues for relationship to build and things like that. And I'm sure it did. But, you know, I would say one of the things that I got to do right was getting some priorities correct. I was talking to a longtime friend of mine a couple of weeks ago. His wife had passed away unexpectedly, and I was visiting with him. And he said, "Do you remember the time that I called you and said that we have a job open at his facility?" And he said, "I knew that you'd be perfect for it. And do you remember me calling you and asking you to take that? Because you were number one on my list that, you know, as a higher pay, that kind of thing. But the thing was, it was going to be a graveyard shift." And I said, I do not remember that conversation. And he said, I remember it like it was yesterday. He said, you told me that you had missed so much with your children when they were young that you did not want to move back into a role that would require you to lose more time with your kids. I didn't remember that, but he did. Mm-hmm. So somewhere down the line, that was important, was no matter what happens here career-wise, no matter what happens financially, no matter what happens with anything else, you're going to be there for your kids. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to point at that and say, I think that's one of the things that I did right. And I
agree with you.
Yeah.
And that's fresh on my mind. I could probably think of other things, but that's one of them that I've really thought about that the last few weeks after having that conversation with him.
So Keith, being in youth ministry and seeing for as long as you have, seeing all these boys, all these girls come through, since we are the Stand Like Men podcast, and we are really trying to figure out how to raise up good, godly men in biblical masculinity, what are some of the challenges that you see, emotional, spiritual, that seem to be plaguing our young men today? I know you've probably seen a gambit, but I know the world's changed also since you started. What do you see that maybe two that are just in our face and we've got to address them?
Okay, so number one, the first thing that I would like to just kind of share with you is identity. Mm-hmm. And I hope this is a good direction to go. If you look around at what we see in the news and what we see on social media, there's a lot of just kind of confusion, fakeness, I guess if that's a word. Mm-hmm. Just a lot of people who are growing up physically but have no idea who they really are. And I know with guys, there's a lot of the, age 25, frontal lobe, all this kind of stuff. But I did prepare a quote that I would like to read real quick. It's by R.C. Sproul. He says, "You ever notice that smart, influential, and successful didn't make the fruit of the Spirit, yet this is what we hope for in our children." Mm-hmm. And I think one of the problems that we have today is we spend so much time in, don't get me wrong, we all want smart children. We want successful children. We want intelligent, able to succeed and work in life children. But we have an identity crisis on our hands. And, I don't think that we are, as a whole, doing a good enough job of planting the idea of what your identity is at an early age. Mm-hmm. Through this lens of who Christ is, I'm going to make this decision, left or right, up or down, whatever it is, and Christ dwelling in me, I'm going to make this decision next. And again, it's not the right or left or road A or road B answer that we're looking for. It's the who am I in Christ that is going to lead that I go this way. Mm-hmm. You hear the story from different people who went to med school and then dropped out to go into ministry. If they were a doctor, a physician, they're going to do it for the kingdom. Or if they were preaching every Sunday at a small church, they're going to do that to glorify the name of Jesus. And I think that I don't really I know what that looks like, but into the minds of parents is where it has to be planted. Mm-hmm. Is that this is going to be important later on. Get the identity correct early on. And, we have, and I'm not knocking anybody, but, we have kids who are way more dedicated, will not miss a football, basketball, baseball practice and spend thousands of dollars, but yet not come to anything we have going on, here at our church. And I get it. There's life outside that matters that you go. And I sound like I'm contradicting myself a little bit. We want our children to go be involved in things in the world to have the influence. But if they don't have the identity correct first on what they are, who they are, then there's a segment of that that's missing, and they're having to figure that out later on in life. So I think number one, that's the biggest thing, is we have to pinpoint and be intentional about teaching our children who they are at an early age, who they are in Christ. If they've made that decision to be a Christian early on, and then building on that idea of who they are and helping them to see the decisions you make, you're going to look back later on in life that maybe I should have went to this school, or maybe I should have taken this job, or, made a different decision with my money, or whatever it is. But it has to go through the lens of who Jesus is in my life first, taking on the identity of Christ. And the second thing that I would kind of talk about a little bit is we have a lot of time on our hands nowadays. We have machines, we have microwaves, we have these phones that sit here next to us that we can be very, very efficient. What are we doing with our time? We can't be idle. When we're idle and we sit still and we spend time scrolling, or we spend time in front of a television or whatever that is, we're being influenced to be a little lackadaisical, I guess is kind of a word you could throw in there. I think casual, yeah. And again, like I said, rest is important. Entertainment's something that we all enjoy, and it is important. But all in what's the word I'm looking for there?
I don't know.
Don't overindulge in some of those things, I guess. It's kind of like the sugar. You can have a little candy.
Moderation.
All in moderation was the exact word I was looking for there. So I'll say that again in case you want to edit it.
I'm going to keep it.
Everything in moderation, right?
There you go.
And I'm as guilty as anybody. I'll find myself working here at the office. I'll get a text on my phone. Well, I pick up my phone, and next thing you know, I've got maybe a notification on my phone, and I check it. And next thing you know, I've spent 30 minutes looking at something, scrolling through that's just cat videos, and you're like, what am I doing? I'm here to work. I'm here to get some things done. So I think with boys especially, it's important to channel energy and, keep them. I'm sure you guys have talked about this 100 times. It's, keeping them active, keeping them, serving the family unit. That comes with that identity. I love some of Joe Brumfeld's quotes from, if you're starting a family tomorrow, what's the number one rule you want? And he's going around 100 kids in this class, of college students. And he started suggesting some of it. And it's one of them was, if one member of the family is working, we're all going to work. In other words, mom does the dishes, mom does the laundry, dad cuts the yard, kind of thing. And I've always thought, man, if I had it to do over again, if I made sure to make that important, that we're not just, while somebody else is working, we're not just sitting around kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I think we're in a real, and this kind of ties on to the identity. We open up the world of social media with our kids and the influence that's there throughout television and throughout YouTube and throughout all these different avenues that they can go. And no wonder we've got an identity crisis on our hands, because they're getting fed, many times things that's just, I don't want to say it's all bad and that it's leading them down a bad road,
right? But
it's not helping to develop who they are, kind of thing. So maybe that's something that, that's just the top two in my mind that we struggle with seeing.
I think those are pretty apparent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And really, really important to address.
Mm-hmm.
What type of man do you want to be?
That's a great question. Whenever you, and I don't, this is kind of heading in a somber direction, I guess, but, the older you get, I just turned 50, so you start thinking, hey, buddy, you're about 2/3 of the way through with this, statistically speaking.
Got more time behind you than in front of you.
Oh, yeah, a lot more. And, that creeps up on you and you hit that and you start to think about that a lot more, and I would encourage you, if you haven't had that conversation with yourself yet or thinking through it. But, if you think about when you die, some people are going to say some nice things about you and your family's going to suffer. And then eventually people are going to move on with their life, and eventually your spouse will and your kids will, and they're going to miss you. But, they have to move on with things. And I've thought about, like, what do I want them to say about me? Well, one thing would be I would hope that the changes that I have made over the last 25 years or so are evident, that earlier we were talking about dwelling on the mistakes, that they also see the ways that I've corrected things. Mm-hmm. So I would hope that I'm seen in a light of as a person who has done a good job of making the incremental steps of being better at being a dad, being better at being a husband, being better at being a youth minister, and these things, so that never settling, I guess. A person who never settles for, this is good enough. I want to be better at, forgiving people. I want to be better at understanding that there are some things that cannot be fixed, and it's not your job to fix them. So I would say that would be important to me, that when that time comes, that I'm not looked at as somebody, oh yeah, it's just a crotchety old man set in his ways kind of thing.
I doubt you're going to be that way.
Oh, I hope not. Get off my lawn kind of thing. So, but I would say that's the base that I would like to kind of be viewed through later on, and that I can come on this podcast, I can listen to other podcasts and go, you know what, they got a point there. I'm not going to be so stubborn to stay in my ways. I'm going to make a change here, and hopefully it's noticeable and it's a good change. Mm-hmm. So.
Awesome.
Or a cowboy. I don't know.
Yeah.
What kind of man do you want to be? I want to ride horses out in the West Texas sun, that kind of thing. So A or B, whichever one you guys want to take there. Not a fireman, though. They have to work too hard.
I think B is the way to go. We cut out all A.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how do you become that? Like, how do you become the guy, the man that because you kind of combine two questions, which what type of man you want to be, but then what do you want people to say about you when you die? So when you were talking, you want your family to say that you were always looking to be better, that you how do you do that?
Well, I think number one, you gotta ask some questions. We have some very wise men in this church who are older than I am. And sometimes it gets very real in those conversations about, how do you handle this next step in life? How do you handle this next phase that you're going through? And those are personal conversations, But I would say number one, you got to always be seeking wisdom, and asking people. And sometimes that comes from, asking others that you've seen it modeled well. What's working right in this family, and then having the kind of relationship with that person to be able to ask them that and be able to get an answer. And so I would say number one, you need to be asking those who've walked it, learning from their mistakes, and we keep kind of tracking back to that. The mistakes are kind of, are what you learn from, and the positive things that you've tried to do to change that. So that's number one. Number two, one thing that I've noticed the older I get is the more that I don't let a lot of the little things bother me anymore.
Yeah.
Some things that I would have argued and fought over years ago, I don't anymore. Kind of stepping back and looking at a bigger picture of what's important. We talked earlier about my wife. we hardly ever fight. And when we do fight, it's over something that's important to both of us. Mm-hmm. And it's going to be something that we, I would love to say it was one of those don't let the sun go down on your anger kind of things. Yeah. But we get it settled and we come to an understanding about it. And, admitting when you're wrong is huge. Mm-hmm. Admitting when you're wrong or apologizing when you're wrong. And I'm sorry is a hard phrase to say sometimes. So wisdom, realizing that you don't have it all figured out. I would say those two things are very important.
Do you have a mentor? Or is it just you have a group of men that if you have a question, you can go talk to some of them? Yeah,
I feel like there's several men that I can talk to about different things. For instance, I would say that, and this is probably it's just the first person that popped in my head, was Peyton Timms is somebody, he's a friend of mine that when I'm struggling about something, I can call him. I noticed that you posted. Can you share what you posted today on Facebook? Can you remember that?
Yeah, well, I'll pull it up real quick.
Yeah,
real quick. I got a lot of comments on that. So a page called The Mindset of a Man posted on Instagram today, and it's a quote. It says, "As a man, no matter what you're going through, keep your mouth shut. Find a way. No one cares."
Yeah, I read through those comments.
Yeah.
I think we have even in the church today, we have a lot of lonely men out there. Mm-hmm. They're surrounded by people all the time. Work, their family, even friends, but they don't have one or two people that they can just say, hey, this is going on right now. And I think Peyton's one of those guys. A few years ago, I had a big, I won't say what event, but we had a huge event that was about to take place. And no matter which direction I went, it was wrong. I'm talking every small decision that I made here. And this was thousands of dollars investment, a lot of people involved. And I come home and I said, Angela was working. She works from home. She was on her computer. And I said, I really need to go talk to somebody. She said, well, call Peyton. And I said, okay. So I called him. He said, yeah, there's nobody in my office. Come on up. And I sat down and I started telling him about everything, every little small thing that was just crashing this. I mean, it's like, I'm ready to just give up. And he said, so let me get this straight. You've done the best you can on all of this. It looked like the right decision, but you just keep getting slapped in the face and things are going wrong, right? Yes. But you've done the best you can. Yeah. Well, what else can they ask of you? And it hit me square between the eyes. It's like, you've really got a point there. It's not that you're on the outside looking in. It looks like you're destroying this thing, kind of messing it up. But when you're doing the best you can, you need somebody to encourage you on that. Mm-hmm. And that's what he did that day. You are doing the best you can with this. Now, another person that I love to go to is Scott Adair, one of our elders. He and I had children that come through high school together at every stage. He actually performed my son's wedding, and I did his daughter's premarital counseling. We were tied as a family for a long time. Grandkids and different things have kind of pulled us away from this, But he's one of those guys where I can check in with, and he knows exactly where I'm at in life. He knows exactly what's going on. And he's another one of those that can help you see through the fog a lot of times, remind you again of your identity, So I would say those two men are pivotal in a lot of the things that I try to look at and say, how can you do this better? And if you can't do it better, then you're doing well enough, buddy. Here's a pat on the back.
Yeah.
And then the longer, more thought out, well, let's give that some thought, or let's pray about that, or what does Scripture say about this? I have one of those in my life that's, very, very strong too. So I'd say those two guys.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for joining us on the Stand Like Men podcast. Again, this is part 2. So join us next time for part 3 with Keith English. And if you're enjoying the show, please like, subscribe, give us a rating. If you want to send in questions or comments or any suggestions for even show topics, please email us at standlikemen@gmail.com or reach out to us on any of the social media platforms like YouTube, Instagram, etc. Our verse is 1 Corinthians 16, 13, and 14.
Be watchful.
Stand firm in the faith. Act like men. Be strong.
Let all that you do be done in love.